My name is Mark. I'm going to tell you the story of how I went from being a nerd to being the most popular kid in school. And it turned out to be a key moment in my life. Anyway, I'll tell you everything later. In the meantime, watch and listen. It's hard to explain what it's like to be a nerd if you're not a nerd. You can't imagine what it's like to be invisible among a crowd of students in college. It's like that every day, until someone in charge of the group wants to make fun of you. I've been humiliated more than once in the class, like throwing my computer out the window, tearing up my lectures, or kicking my jacket or bag. And that's just a small part of the trials that happened to me. I remember one day, I decided to prove to everyone that I was worth something. The problem was, though, that I didn't really know how to do anything. I was a shit student, I had no money, and I could barely pay off my debts, I mean my tuition. I had the lamest room in the dorm because I had more trash thrown out under my window, and I smoked and drank at night. I couldn't tell the guys to stop doing that, because otherwise, I was in big trouble, and there was no room for me in that whole world. My only dream was to not only be a part of it but to lead it. Like Derek, he was in charge, like the head of the class. He ran everything. He was the one who embarrassed me the most. He invited me to his party, and then he made fun of me by taking my belt off and throwing me in the pool. My pants fell, everyone laughed, and I was angry. That's when I decided I didn't want to be bullied anymore. I wanted to assert myself, but how? What are all the people in the world afraid of? Have you ever thought about that? What? Death? Disease? Bankruptcy? All of these things are true. But not this one. Secrets. That's what many people fear. More precisely, secrets that might come out. That's what's scary. That's what many of them would give up everything for, just to keep their secrets a secret. I came up with a plan. Luckily, my classmates didn't notice me and never took me seriously. I walked behind them like a shadow, reading a book in the park, sitting in a nearby toilet stall, or eating in the cafeteria, or rather, pretending to. While my classmates were sharing with each other. We had a girl in my class named Sheila, who was a real gossip. She was always in the loop, not everything was to be believed, but there was something to be taken out. I kept a notebook of who stole what from who hooked up with who cheated on who, that sort of thing. All this information was my hope that I would make it to the top, that I would be feared and respected. At one soccer game, I came as a spectator. Our high school team was playing against the neighboring school. As you may have guessed, my classmates like Derek were also with the national team. So, I came just because I had never gone before. I thought it was time to somehow socialize, time to change. After the second half, the ball flew in my direction, and in theory, I should have caught it and one of the cheerleaders would have kissed me. I thought, well, this is my time. I'm going to do it. I caught the ball, the camera looked at me, I was so excited. Then Derek came up to me, took off his pants, and standing there in his underpants, said into the microphone, "You deserve to kiss my ass." The whole stadium exploded with laughter. I got upset and ran away from there. When I got home, I pulled out my notebook and decided to go on the offensive. The very next day I got up early the next morning and ran to school. Within an hour, the place was in chaos. Derek's girlfriend opened her locker and saw an interesting envelope. There were pictures of Derek with his other halves. All of them, just not her. She cringed when she saw how many girls he drove around in his BMW and more. She ran to him angrily and in tears, hitting Stacy on the way. Oh, she's a real piece of work. She broke my glasses the other day when I looked at her boobs accidentally, and then it took me 3 hours to get home because I couldn't see anything. She got a message in the mail about how her daddy wasn't working at the bank like he told everyone, but as a street janitor because their family had gone bankrupt. Stacy was so shocked that she ran outside. She ran home. That's when Black walked into the school. Oh, that's Derek's sixth man, his pawn. Black's weakness was computer games, he was obsessed with them. What was his surprise when, thanks to a hacker I knew, his accounts were blocked everywhere, and we managed to spend his electronic gamer money on stuff. Black was in no mood. Then Derek ran past me, running after his girlfriend and trying to explain himself. That's when Black stopped him.
What do you want, man? I don't have time for you right now.
I have to. Man, I'm in trouble.
Which ones?
My logins. Only you knew the passwords. You've been skimming from my account. Where did you put all the money and why did you block me everywhere?
Are you kidding me? I don't need it.
Then who does?
How should I know? Dude, my girlfriend found out about my other guys.
So what? You got a bunch of them. One more or one less. Do you know how many years I worked for the games?
Fuck the games. Real life is more complicated than that.
What do you mean? Are you saying it's bullshit?
Yeah, It is. Maybe it's for the best that you lost it all. At least for once, you'll feel something other than your virtual sensations.
What did you say?
There was a fight between them. Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted. A minute later, they were called to the principal's office. An hour later, they were suspended for a week. The funny thing was, they were electing a new class president that day. Thanks to my chips, I was the only one sitting in the class. The teacher was pissed. She said that the rule was to wait for everyone. I said, and for how long? Excuse me? How long do you have to wait? Is our study worth those who were suspended? Some just ran away without even telling you. Like Stacy, some are stuck in the cafeteria right now, eating stress because her boyfriend dumped her. What? Students like that are worthy of picking the best? Would students like that be able to be held accountable like a head teacher? What are you suggesting? Myself. My candidacy. Why I rarely get sick, I'm good with discipline, and also, I do not need someone's love and I do not value my reputation. So I do not intimidate anything. Yes, you have a point. Alright, I'll report your appointment to the director. And I've already spoken to her. She's fine with it. That's how. Okay, Mark, I'm waiting to hear from you. I got the power. That's what I needed. The next day I met my classmates at the doorstep of the classroom, told them off for appearance, tardiness, and gave them points for discipline. They didn't like me, but they couldn't say anything, much less hurt me. Derek went around spitting with his buddies, but it didn't bother me. After 3 days everyone was used to it, and then Derek decided to rebel. I knew he was trying to push me around, to intimidate me. That's what people who have no brains, only brute force do, and those who resist the circumstances, who don't want to accept. That means he sees me as competition. Derek, in the old song, pinned me down in the bathroom, punched me in the nose a couple of times, and told me that if I didn't give up my position as head boy, and with it the privileges of good marks, he was going to get me. That same night I sent his father a video from an unknown number of his dear son stealing his father's car from the garage, and then runs over the spikes I'd planted. I knew what days and what times he did it. Derek wasn't at school in the morning. His dad punished him. Rumor had it that he wanted to send him to military school instead of college. That's where he belonged. -1, I said cheerfully, and came home. I decided that I was going to take out anyone who prevented me from enjoying my status. Besides, after 5 months I had a seat on the school's presidium. That meant that I would become even more popular. All that was left to do was to take out the extra people. You say, cruel? I agree. But on the whole, I don't think so, because people like them will never understand what it's like to be a shadow like me. Thus, after 2 months, 2 more students who were my haters left of their own accord. One of them for having an affair with a physicist, the other for stealing from the cafeteria. 2 others were taken by their parents themselves, to avoid a scandal. I had no barriers left. And when it was my hour for the presidium, I was summoned to her office by the principal. Hello, Mark, I invited you for a chat. About what? Maybe it's a coincidence, but why in a few months? Just when you became head teacher, the most successful students left our class. What are you implying? Is it not your doing? I'm just doing my duty. You're overreacting, Mark. What were those students good for? They were the best. They were just rich. Okay, what's your point? Ms. Mells, let's not get dramatic. Do you think I don't know how much their parents were paying you every month for every bad grade you missed or divorced? What do you do? Afford? You're the one who allowed yourself to buy a fancy house, a car for your son, right? How much is the principal's salary now? What do you want? To head the presidium. It's impossible. According to protocol, you don't have enough seniority and you're not old enough. So change the protocol, otherwise, the ministry will come tomorrow with an inspection. Blackmail? Contract. Business proposal. You have 24 hours. Think about it. 3 days later, I was head of the presidium. You'll see, guys, no one else dares stand in my way. After all, my previously invisible life has allowed me to discover all the secrets. Even yours.
Hi everyone, my name is Eleanor. People still call me Elia. Elia Tits. Yes, if you don't know, tits are breasts. Nature rewarded me with 2 melons in full. And before you get jealous, tell me how cool and beautiful it is, I'll tell you about the pros and cons of such an award. Well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write your opinion in the comments. Please support me. So, my whole childhood was like everyone else's. I played, met children, and everything was fine until I was 10 years old. At this stage, girls began the so-called growing up. It was a terrible period because my caring mother would not let me rest. She examined me every day and observed the changes in my body, and I was so uncomfortable, and I really wanted to be left alone, but it didn't happen. My favorite items in my wardrobe were t-shirts and sweatshirts. I just loved wearing them because you could eat as much as you wanted in them and you still couldn't see your stomach. Well, once my mother and I were going to go to some holiday. It was a wedding, I think. My mom bought me a nice white t-shirt with a small net and something else. "Mom, what is this?" I asked her, and she was like, "This is a bra. You are now grown up, and so you need to wear it. You can take them off at night and only walk with it during the day," she said. I picked it up, my first bra in my life, and realized that it was uncomfortable. Rejecting the idea of trying it on, I put on a t-shirt and said I would go like this. My mother did not contradict me. We quickly gathered and went to the event. I went there in a good mood because I just loved to look at the brides. They looked just magical. I sat down at the table and realized that the kid sitting across from me was staring at me. At first, I didn't know where he was looking, but then I looked closer and noticed that he was looking at my breasts. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. Only then did I notice that my chest was sticking out and more, well, you know what. It was a nightmare. I felt ashamed and embarrassed. I went to my mother and told her about the situation. She smiled and said, "I brought you something to wear. You have grown breasts and there is nothing wrong with that. A woman without breasts, like without arms, all girls have them." Then the music started playing and I wanted to dance so much. I just loved dancing. But when I went out on the dance floor and made a couple of rhythmic movements, I realized that they were bothering me, and that kid was still staring at me. I immediately sat down at the table and sat hunched over all evening. I didn't want to get up and be looked at all. Of course, the adults didn't see it, but that boy, he really confused me. Running home in the evening, I took a shower and picked up the bra. Somehow I put it on myself and looked in the mirror. My mother came into the room at that moment and said that it fits perfectly. I didn't understand what that means. How can breasts look great at all? My mother said that this device holds the chest when walking and running, and then we are not hurt or uncomfortable. I wore it to school the next day and still didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't want to discuss my body with the girls, but they still saw it when we changed in the locker room. I began to hide it, and then it turned out that 8 of my classmates already wear such things. This calmed me down. And then the nightmare started. My breasts were growing non-stop. After a couple of months, my mother bought me a bra in a bigger size, and then another and another. When I returned to school after the summer holidays, my classmates were totally freaking out. They didn't see me, they saw my breasts. And even the big white t-shirts couldn't hide them. At the first lesson, when I sat down at my desk, I realized that my breasts did not fit there. I sat down closer, but I squeezed them hard. It caused pain, and then I had to put them on the table. You won't believe it, but I closed half of my notebook. I was still sitting on the first desk in front of the teacher, and when the historian came to us, said hello and sat down in his seat, he just paused for a minute and looked at me. Can you imagine how awkward it was? All the kids in the class noticed his reaction and just started laughing out loud. Their laughter finally distracted the teacher, and he blushed, then asked me to move back. I was ready to sink through the ground. But then something even worse happened. We had gym class. For your information, I'm a pretty good dancer. Yes, it's true. And I have great flexibility. And I was determined to get into a cheerleading group because it offered huge advantages for high school students to go to college. Who doesn't need a scholarship to study? Everyone. But for this, you need to be active and persistent. So cheerleading is the best thing. I was put on the girls' team because of the plastic surgery, and our captain didn't hide the fact that my gorgeous breasts would have an effect. Well, for the sake of such a case, I agreed, but I didn't think that I would need to wear a certain uniform. I was given a short skirt and a crop top and invited to a rehearsal. As soon as I entered the hall, our boys started whistling, calling me Elia Tits and clapping their hands. Damn, I wanted to get out of there, but I set a clear goal and went with it. So I took all my will and started dancing. Our boys were often distracted from the game, watching my breasts jump. Sometimes they threw the ball in my direction and asked me to pick it up. I was maddened by the humiliation. Training turned into a nightmare, and I came home in a bad mood. My mother immediately noticed the tears and sat down to talk to me. I told her everything, and then my mother got up and led me to the bedroom. She showed me a photo when she was young, and I couldn't believe it was her. My mother had the same breasts as me. They were huge. My mother laughed a lot when she told me about them. I asked her how she coped with them, and my mother said that it was also awkward and difficult for her, but then she just accepted herself like this. By the way, your dad married me because of them, and you won't believe it, but everyone was jealous of him. It is now they are smaller and not as elastic and beautiful as yours, but women's breasts are very beautiful, she told me. My mother took another bra out of the closet, but it was open work black with wide straps, and she gave it to me. I also said that it would be much more comfortable for me, and it also made me feel different, more feminine. And you know, she was right. As soon as I tried it on, I saw a different side of myself and realized that I was beautiful. My participation in cheerleading will only get better. I straightened up and smiled at myself. The very next day, I came to school in new underwear and a beautiful blouse. I began to be perceived differently, as a lady, and not as a kid in sweatshirts. Now, all the training sessions I gathered an audience of boys from my class and others, and I felt like a queen. I realized that I should be proud of such a natural part of myself. Do you think it's beautiful or not?